There is a version of you that exists only on the other side of 100 days of unwavering commitment. Not 95, not most days, not the days when you feel motivated. 100. In Japanese martial traditions, the path toward this transformation is called Shuhari. Shu, obey the form. Ha, break the form. Ri, transcend the form. It is a journey from discipline to mastery to freedom. But the truth is, most people never even step into Shu, not because they are weak, but because they have never stayed long enough with anything to meet the person they could have become. This is the story of a man who learned that truth inside the walls of an old dojo in the mountains of Iwate Prefecture. An ordinary man who discovered a skull. His name was Riku. 31, a salaryman in Tokyo who lived inside a routine he did not choose. He woke each morning to an alarm he hated, rode the crowded subway, pressed between strangers, sat behind a desk, answering emails that sounded exactly like the emails from the day before. He came home exhausted, not from the work, but from the emptiness inside the work. His life was not tragic, it was numbing. A slow erosion of self. Yet when people asked how he was, he always smiled and said, "I'm fine," because numbness can mascara. One night, after a particularly draining day, he found himself standing outside a small bookstore near his apartment. He didn't know why he walked inside. Perhaps he was trying to escape the fluorescent lights of the office lingering in his mind. Perhaps life was leading him gently by the collar. He wandered through the aisles and stopped at a shelf labeled Old Japanese Wisdom. His eyes caught a thin, worn-out book titled Shuhari, The 3 Stages of Mastery. He flipped through it, stopping at a passage highlighted in faded ink. Commit to one practice for 100 days, and you will meet a version of yourself the world has never seen. He felt something in his chest tighten, a quiet ache, a longing, as though a sleeping part of him had lifted its head. He bought the book without thinking. That night, he read until dawn. Something awakened in him. Not excitement, not hope, but a strange clarity, a recognition that he needed to anchor himself to something real, something that asked for discipline instead of distraction, presence instead of performance. The next morning, without fully understanding why, he took a train north to Iwate to visit the mountain dojo mentioned in the final chapter of the book. It was run by a reclusive sensei named Hayama, known for accepting only a handful of students each year. Riku doubted he would be accepted. He doubted he was worthy of any kind of path. But doubt, as he would soon learn, is the first gate of Shuhari. The dojo sat at the foot of a forest, its wooden boards weathered by years of winter storms and summer heat. Riku approached hesitantly, bowing awkwardly as he slid the door open. Inside, an older man knelt before a simple altar. His hair was silver and tied back, his posture straight, his presence steady like an ancient cedar tree. He turned his head slightly. "You are late." Riku blinked. "Late? I didn't have an appointment." Hayama closed his eyes briefly, as if annoyed by unnecessary explanations. "Everyone who arrives is late," he said. "Now speak. Why are you here?" Riku swallowed hard. I want to learn. I want to commit to something. I don't care if it's hard. His voice broke unexpectedly. "I'm tired of being a shallow version of myself." Hayama rose slowly, his movements controlled, intentional. He walked around Riku in a slow circle, examining him, not with judgment, but with clarity. 100 days, he finally said. One practice. No excuses, no rest days, no modifications. Riku nodded, adrenaline rising. "I'll try." Hayama raised an eyebrow. Do not try. Trying is the language of tourists. Commit or leave. Something about the finality in his voice steadied Riku. I commit, he said. Hayama pointed to a bamboo broom leaning against the wall. Good. Your practice begins now. Sweep. Riku stared at him. Sweep. Hayama nodded. For 100 days you will sweep this entire dojo every morning at sunrise. That is your practice. Riku felt his face heat. But I thought I would be learning martial arts. Hayama walked away. You are. Riku stood frozen. The broom felt heavy in his hand. He had expected punches, kicks, stances, something noble, something dramatic. But sweeping felt meaningless. He nearly left. But something held him there. Perhaps pride, perhaps desperation. Perhaps the faint memory of the highlighted sentence in the book. So he began sweeping. The floor was old and covered with a thin layer of dust that rose like ghosts with each stroke of the broom. His arms ached after 15 minutes. His lower back after 30. He gritted his teeth, feeling foolish, feeling deceived. But Hayama watched silently from the corner, sipping tea. When Riku finally finished, chest heaving, sweat dripping down his forehead, Hayama asked, "Why is the corner still dirty?" Riku looked. A small patch of dust remained. I didn't see it. Hayama responded, Then see, and he walked away. The next morning, Riku woke before dawn, muscles stiff from the unfamiliar labor. He swept again, and again, and again. On the 8th day, he wanted to quit. On the 12th, he nearly did. On the 14th, he realized the dojo was not the thing being cleaned, he was. His impatience, his arrogance, his belief that he needed dramatic experiences to become someone worthy. He was learning presence, one stroke at a time. By day 20, he began noticing things. He had overlooked the grain of the wooden boards, the way dust gathered more densely near the entrance, the faint sound of wind passing through the gaps in the sliding doors. His senses sharpened because sweeping forced him to slow down, because repetition became meditation. One cold morning, as he swept in silence, Hayama approached. Tell me, the old sensei said, what is the purpose of sweeping? Riku thought for a long moment before answering. To clean the floor, Hayama chuckled softly. If cleaning were the purpose, I would hire someone else. The purpose is to teach you how to care for something that doesn't applaud you. Riku felt something inside him shift. On day 30, a storm hit the mountain. Harsh winds pushed against the dojo. Snowflakes rushed sideways like arrows. Riku still swept. Hayama watched him from inside with unreadable eyes. When Riku entered, shivering, Hayama placed a cup of hot tea in his hands. You showed up, he said. That is all that separates a student from a wanderer. As the days passed, sweeping became less of a task and more of a ritual. A way of grounding himself. A way of listening. A way of meeting the man beneath the noise. What Riku didn't know yet, what he couldn't yet see, was that sweeping was preparing him for everything that would come next. The final 70 days would test him in ways he had never imagined. But the foundation was being laid now quietly beneath each stroke of the broom. The man he would become was already forming, and he was nothing like the man who first walked through the dojo doors. By the 42nd day, sweeping had become something Riku could do with his eyes closed. He moved with a rhythm so precise that the broom seemed to glide on its own. But Hayama saw through the illusion. One morning, just as Riku finished the last section of the dojo, Hayama said, Good, now sweep again. Riku stared at him, baffled. Again. But Hayama raised a hand. Your first sweep was done by habit, not presence. Repetitions done without consciousness build nothing. Riku clenched his jaw, but he obeyed. This time he paid attention. Not to the strokes, but to his breath. The sound of the bristles, the pressure on his palms, the subtle shift of dust. He swept not quickly, but deliberately. When he finished, Hayama nodded once, as though acknowledging something Riku couldn't yet name. It was around this time that Riku began noticing changes outside the dojo as well. His thoughts were less scattered. His nervous habits checking his phone, constantly tapping his foot, racing mentally through to-do lists, faded without effort. His posture straightened. His breathing slowed. He ate quietly instead of in rushed bites. He fell asleep without the usual swarm of restless thoughts. Yet even with these shifts, Riku felt unsettled. A strange question pressed at him. Was sweeping enough? Was this really the path to mastery? He longed to advance to learn something that looked like progress. But Hayama offered no new instructions, no new exercises, only sweeping. One morning on day 51, Riku finally voiced what had been simmering inside him. "Sensei," he said, standing stiffly at the center of the dojo, "when will I learn martial techniques?" Hayama looked up from polishing a wooden training sword. "You have been learning them." Riku frowned. "No, I mean real techniques." Hayama set down the sword with slow precision. "Shu," he said, means obedience. You cannot break form or transcend form until the form lives in your bones. Right now, the only form you can hold is a broom. Riku felt his face flush with embarrassment and frustration. "But I feel ready for more." Hayama shook his head gently. Feeling ready is the first sign you are not. Riku wanted to argue, but stopped himself. The sensei's words hit deeper than he expected. He bowed and returned to sweeping. That night, lying in his futon, he replayed the conversation. Every part of him burned with impatience, not because he didn't value the sweeping, but because he feared stagnation. Yet somewhere beneath the frustration, something small and fragile whispered, "Trust this." It was the same whisper he felt the day he bought the Shuhari book, a whisper he was learning to listen to. On day 58, something unexpected happened. A group of visitors came to the dojo, 3 men in their 30s dressed in expensive outdoor gear. They laughed loudly, tracking mud on the entrance boards. Hayama met them at the door. "We are not accepting new students today," he said. One of them scoffed. "We just want to see the place. It's famous." Hayama's eyes hardened. "Fame is a distraction. Leave." The men exchanged glances, irritated. Then one pointed at Riku, who was sweeping silently in the corner. "You're teaching him? Seriously? He looks pathetic." Riku froze. Something inside him tightened. Shame, anger, old insecurities curling like smoke. Before he could speak, Hayama said sharply, "This man shows up every day. He obeys the form. He will surpass you because you seek admiration more than mastery." The men went quiet. Something in Hayama's tone, calm but razor sharp, held the weight of truth. They left without another word. When the dojo returned to silence, Riku whispered, "Sensei, thank you." Hayama walked past him without looking back. "Do not thank me. Thank your broom. It has built the part of you that can withstand humiliation." Riku stared down at the broom, humbled. He had never considered that sweeping had strengthened anything beyond his arms. But in that moment, he understood the discipline he built quietly had become armor. By day 65, Riku's sweeping evolved into something deeper than routine. He noticed the sound of the forest beyond the dojo walls. He felt subtle tensions in his body and corrected them without thinking. He sensed the weight of his own emotions, before they could spill over. He listened more, spoke less. He didn't know it, but he had entered the middle gate of Shuhari Ha, the breaking of form, the beginning of intuitive understanding. One evening, after Riku had finished sweeping, Hayama sat down across from him. "Take this." He handed Riku a wooden bakken. Riku blinked. His heart pounded. "Sensei, does this mean?" Hayama raised a hand. "Shu is complete. Now we break form." Riku's hands trembled as he held the bakken. The wood felt warm, heavy, alive. Hayama stood and motioned for Riku to follow him outside. The air was cold, the sky pale with the first hint of twilight. They stood under towering cedar trees, their branches swaying gently. Hayama said, "Strike." Riku hesitated. "Strike." What? Hayama pointed to a wooden post. "It represents your obstacle." Riku lifted the bakken awkwardly. His stance was off, his arms shaky. He swung. The strike was clumsy, lacking direction. Hayama said, "Again." Riku swung harder, too hard. His grip slipped. The bakken twisted in his hands. Again. Riku's shoulders burned. His wrists ached. Again. Sweat dripped down his back despite the cold. Again. Each strike chipped away at the shell of who Riku thought he was. Frustration twisted in his chest. He gritted his teeth and tried to correct his form. Hayama shook his head. "You are thinking. Stop thinking. Strike from the center." Riku had no idea what that meant until, on the 27th strike, something clicked. He exhaled. At the same moment, he swung, letting breath guide motion. His shoulders relaxed, his feet grounded. The bakken cut through the air in a clean, decisive arc. Hayama nodded. "That came from your center, not your arms." Riku collapsed to his knees, exhausted, but exhilarated in a way he had never experienced. The strike felt like truth, like a pure expression of self he had been too fragmented to access before. The next morning, sweeping felt different. He wasn't simply caring for the dojo. He was preparing the space where he would continue breaking and rebuilding himself. Hayama introduced new exercises, holding stances for long periods, practicing controlled breathing, striking the post with increasing precision. Riku struggled. Some days he made progress. Other days he regressed. But he never missed a sunrise, and slowly the line between sweeping and striking blurred. He understood now that both were expressions of Shuhari. By day 70, he could feel the change in his body. His muscles moved with coordination he never had before. His movements were lighter, his awareness sharper. But the deeper transformation was happening in his mind. The impatience that once gnawed at him had softened. His self-doubt had thinned. He didn't think of Tokyo, his old life, or the man he had been. The mountain, the dojo, the broom, the bakken. These were his world now. He lived inside the practice. On day 74, Hayama said, "You are no longer doing the practice. You are becoming the practice." Riku didn't fully understand the meaning, but the words stirred something in him. That night, he lay awake in his futon, sensing a quiet shift within himself. He wasn't seeking transformation anymore. It was happening without permission. On day 81, the real test arrived. A bear had wandered near the training grounds during the night. Its prints were fresh. Its scent lingered in the cold air. Riku found Hayama examining the tracks. "Should we be worried?" Riku asked. Hayama shook his head. Life tests form, not words. Later that afternoon, while Riku practiced strikes, he heard rustling near the tree line. He turned. A bear cub emerged, small but curious. Riku froze. His heartbeat thundered. Then behind the cub, the mother appeared, massive, dark, protective. She growled. Riku felt every muscle in his body stiffen. Hayama didn't shout. He didn't run. He simply placed a hand on the bakken in Riku's trembling hands and whispered, "Center." The bear growled again, stepping forward. Riku's breath shook. Hayama whispered, "Center, breathe. Be large inside." Riku inhaled. Something ancient awakened. He held the bakken low but firm. His stance widened. His fear didn't disappear, but it no longer controlled him. When the bear rose slightly on its legs, Hayama shouted a deep, resonant, "Hey!" that echoed into the trees. The bear flinched. Then it turned, herding the cub away. When the forest returned to silence, Riku collapsed to the ground, trembling uncontrollably. Hayama knelt beside him. "Do you see now?" he whispered. "Shuhari is not about fighting. It is about becoming unbreakable." That night, Riku cried for the first time in years. Not out of fear, but out of recognition. His 100 days were almost complete, and he was no longer the same man who had stepped off the train in Iwate. He was someone entirely new, someone he had once believed he could never be. Day 85 arrived with a silence so pure, it felt almost sacred. The snow on the mountain had begun to soften, melting into streams that trickled through the forest. Riku swept the dojo as always, but something in his movements had changed. He was not rushing, nor was he dragging the broom as a chore. Each stroke had intention, steadiness, breath. He finished the entire dojo without a single wandering thought. As he placed the broom back against the wall, Hayama said, "Your mind is finally quiet." Riku bowed. "I didn't notice." Hayama nodded. Quiet minds never notice themselves. Only noisy minds do. There was no praise in his voice, only truth. Riku felt no need for praise either. The transformation was no longer something he needed to see. He could feel it. On day 89, Hayama said, "Today you will train alone." Riku felt a flicker of fear. For weeks, Hayama had watched over every strike, every stance correction, every shift in posture. Training alone felt like a test without instructions. But he bowed and obeyed. He stepped outside, chose a spot in the clearing, and began moving through the strikes. Without Hayama's voice correcting him, he relied on something else, intuition. He listened not to thoughts, but to sensation. Feet grounding into soil, shoulders unlocking, breath guiding movement. After an hour, he entered a flow state so deep, the world around him dissolved. He moved like someone who had practiced for years. Not perfect, but honest. When he returned to the dojo, sweat soaked into his training clothes. Hayama looked at him once and said, "You have entered the final gate. Now you transcend form." Riku didn't fully understand, but something inside him did. On day 91, Hayama gave Riku an unexpected instruction. "Walk the forest," he said, "without purpose, without direction. Do not try to meditate. Do not try to control your breathing. Let the world speak to you." Riku obeyed. He stepped into the forest path and let his feet decide. He listened to the creaking branches, tracked the movement of birds, smelled the dampness rising from the moss. For the first time in decades, he felt not like a man moving through nature, but like someone who belonged to it. No separation, no division, just presence. He walked for hours until he reached a small waterfall cascading down a rocky slope. He stood in front of it, mesmerized by how unforced everything was. Water didn't demand permission to fall. The earth didn't negotiate how to hold it. The world moved effortlessly. Riku felt tears roll down his cheeks, not sadness, not joy, but recognition. He whispered, "This is what it means to be alive." When he returned to the dojo, Hayama simply said, "You have begun seeing clearly." On day 94, Hayama placed 2 cushions on the floor, one for himself, one for Riku. "Sit," he said. Riku knelt. They faced each other, knees touching the tatami. Hayama said, "Tell me why you came here." Riku inhaled. "I was lost, empty, tired of a life that didn't feel like mine." Hayama nodded. "And what did you hope to find?" Riku looked down at his hands. "Something I could commit to. Something real." Hayama leaned forward slightly. "And what have you found?" "Instead," Riku swallowed, "myself." Hayama closed his eyes for a moment, as though honoring the answer. Then he said, "Good. Because the world does not need more people who perform their lives. It needs people who inhabit them." Riku felt something inside him settle like stones aligning in a riverbed. Day 95 was the hardest. Not because of the training, but because of doubt. Riku woke before dawn with a strange heaviness in his chest. A quiet panic. What happens after day 100? The question lodged itself in his mind. He feared losing his way again, once he left the mountain. The dojo had held him together. Hayama had guided him. What if he lost everything, once the structure disappeared? That morning, his sweeping was sloppy. His strikes were unfocused. His breath uneven. Hayama watched silently. When Riku finally stopped, frustrated and shaking, Hayama said, "You fear losing your transformation. You fear the man you were returning." Riku lowered his head, ashamed. "Yes." Hayama stepped forward. "Listen carefully," he said, voice sharp but warm. "You do not carry the practice. The practice carries you. What you have built cannot be undone by distance." Riku looked up. "But how do I know I won't slip?" Hayama tapped a finger against Riku's chest. "Because the man who fears slipping is not the same man who once refused to sweep." Riku exhaled shakily. Something released inside him. Day 98 arrived with a calm clarity. His routines, once difficult, then familiar, then intuitive, now felt like breathing. Hayama began teaching him subtle techniques, moving from the hips instead of the shoulders, reading intention in micro shifts of balanced striking without telegraphing movement. But these techniques weren't the point. They were symbols, ways to test whether the foundation inside Riku was stable. It was. Even Hayama could see it. On day 99, Hayama said, "Tomorrow is the final day. You will face one last test." Riku nodded, preparing himself. Was it a physical challenge? A mental one? A demanding sequence of strikes? But Hayama revealed nothing. That night, Riku struggled to sleep. Not because of fear, but because of anticipation. Not excitement, but quiet readiness. 100 days. A journey he had never thought he could finish. A version of himself he had never imagined meeting. And tomorrow, it would all converge. Day 100 dawned with a soft pink light washing over the mountain. Riku swept the dojo one last time. Every stroke felt like a farewell. When he finished, Hayama stood at the center of the room, holding two bakken. "Today," he said, "you will spar with me." Riku froze. "Sensei, I'm not ready." Hayama cut him off. "If you feel unready, you are ready." He tossed Riku a bakken. Riku caught it, the weight familiar now. They bowed. Then with no warning, Hayama struck. The first blow was so fast Riku barely blocked it. The shock reverberated through his arms. Hayama struck again harder. Riku countered. Their movements blurred. The sound of wood clashing echoed through the dojo like thunder. Riku's breath matched his strikes, steady, grounded. He wasn't thinking anymore. The training lived in his muscles. The sweeping lived in his awareness. The forest lived in his breath. Each strike was honest, clean, present. Hayama swung with a force Riku had never seen from him before. Riku stepped into the strike instead of away from it. Their bakken collided, but Riku held his ground. Hayama's eyes widened slightly, not in surprise, but in recognition. Riku moved with a clarity and calm that could not be faked. A final exchange. Fast, brutal, precise. Then Hayama stepped back and lowered his bakken. "It is done," he said softly. Riku blinked, chest heaving. "Sensei, did I pass?" Hayama approached, placing a hand on Riku's shoulder. "Passing implies an ending. Shuhari has no ending. You have simply begun your life." Riku bowed deeply. His throat tightened. This wasn't victory, it was release. That afternoon, Riku packed his small bag. He looked at the broom, leaning in the corner, the object he once hated now sacred. He touched its handle gently. "Thank you," he whispered.